Hello and greetings. This is Dan speaking. Today we are doing a new segment called Problems, where we study general problems in fiction.
And occasionally outside of fiction. And I'm his co-host, Joe. But today we're discussing the first Spider-Man costume. Sorry, I can't help myself.
You just destroyed the eardrums of those with headphones.
Oh, walk it off.
They won't be able to understand anything about this video.
Good! That means they could just like, subscribe, comment, and share, and we could just talk about whatever we want. And on top of that, who knows? If you go by certain folk in society, deafness seems to give you special superpowers. And even All Caps Comics has proven that with Starblades.
Huh? What were you saying?
My point. Anyways, enough jokes at everybody's expense on both sides of the aisle. In all seriousness, though, the first Spider-Man costume is... it just looks...
It worked when it started.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
It looks good in the animated series that we're watching currently.
But the problem is, it's not as good as the second Spider-Man costume. The one from the 90s that Ben Reilly made. That one is a really good one. That's the best Spidey costume ever.
Some costume could stand to change. For example,
Spider-Man.
Before Flashpoint, Wonder Woman's costume that allowed her, to retract pants, but it covered one of the primary complaints, and it did look nice.
Well, you mean like the star-studded pants she wore?
Yeah.
I think that was primarily an Injustice, but yeah, that was a good modification.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people would say, no, you can't change her costumes. Okay, I'll say this. I think the corset has to stay, the tiara, everything, but I do think pants probably could have helped her reputation a bit more.
That was the only change they did. Post Brightest Day, pre-Flashpoint.
Yeah, I think they did that. I think that was Injustice that did that, but the problem with Injustice was the story was garbage, and their treatment of Wonder Woman was garbage.
And then you have costumes that shouldn't change, like Superman.
Yeah, Superman's classic outfit was always the best.
As much as people joked and complained
about the underwear,
it's like...
his costume was iconic.
Yeah, and I have a hard time looking at modern Superman costumes.
I hate them.
And
the only time I've ever been able to tolerate it was Henry Cavill.
Oh, of course. It's Henry Cavill.
But that said, the problem with Man of Steel is, the first half of the movie is pretty good. The second half is pretty garbage.
Yes.
But that's typical. Well, look at it this way. It's the best writing Zack Snyder's ever been able to come up with, considering he's probably history's worst director.
And sometimes editors and writers have something to do with change or a regression in costumes. For example, many Batman editors were willing to let Batman's costume change. I mean, before Flashpoint, they lost the briefs. That's fine with Batman.
Yeah, with Batman, I never liked the briefs.
They lost the yellow spotlight oval on his costume.
I never liked the yellow bit.
And they changed the look of the bat on his chest plate.
Yeah, from a small one to a larger one. That in post-crisis universe, that was always a positive.
They darkened the gray, and it looked really sleek and nice.
Yes.
Even the Robin costumes went through changes.
I like the red costume.
Yeah.
That Jason Todd has, and Under the Red Hood, and I have to admit that Tim Drake wore. And what I like about the Batman costume is just how it looks like armor. And that's how it should look. But you look at Spider-Man, the cartoon can pull it off, but the problem with the comics was eventually it didn't seem to fit.
And it needed an update, and it went through several.
No, it only really went through one.
Yeah, the black costume.
Yeah, you have the Black Venom symbiote. Then you got the Scarlet Spider outfit, which looks pretty cool. Then you got the Ben Reilly black and red costume, which is the greatest Spider costume of all times. And when they chucked it away, that basically for me was, okay, I'm done.
Mhm.
No more Spidey for me, because
it's
like visually he wasn't Spider-Man anymore.
losing the black costume and taking back the original costume.
Oh, that was an important plot point.
Exactly.
No, I agree with that. I just meant chucking the black and red for the old costume. I just found it like visually, you're just okay. We want to have Peter wearing pajamas instead of this sleek, nice, badass hero costume. And I found that it was more iconic. With the spider being larger, and it had done the change to Spider-Man that the bat thing did for the bat emblem did for Batman.
And it was still recognizable.
It was even more recognizable.
As it had all of the same colors as the original
No, except black and red.
Okay. It had similar motif.
Same look.
Same look.
Except better.
Yeah, and there's the
web shooters somewhat. Well, parts of the web shooters on the exterior,
which they probably took inspiration from some Black Widow costumes.
And I think also Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could just look at it and you know it's Batman that helped inspire this. But here's the thing. I would argue, except Spider-Man looks even better. And they're trying to say, I find that they were trying to go from, okay, we know Spider-Man's a rom-com hero, but let's make him an action superhero. And for me, like, I know people are going to say, no, Spider-Man was not a rom-com hero. Just read the 1962 to 1989 period. You have yourself a rom-com hero. The primary plot point is, will Mary Jane and him ever realize how truly they love each other? Will they get down the aisle? Will true love win and prevail? Like, honestly, I don't mind true love being an important part of the character's life, but it's the predominant plot, like, it's the predominant feature of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, it kind of started to damage the character.
And that's probably one reason why you associate the classical costume with bad, because it has to do with the genre and the line of thought when writing.
Now, don't get me wrong, folks. My favorite character from that era is MJ. She was a main character. She was a spectacular main character because the story mostly revolved around her. And she had, at a few points, more screen time than Peter. And that's fine because she was the most interesting character. But the problem was, it was starting to come at the expense of Peter's character.
Mm-hmm.
Now, MJ, Silver, and Peter are the best characters that came out of the comics of that era. Thank heavens they killed off Gwen. Whew! Dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
But that was something when I went back in college to read that era, I was like right in the mid-70s era, I was starting to go, oh, can we throw this costume? Like, I don't really care. But then they killed off Gwen, and I went, whew, that redeems the story. I love this. Great. There's finally a plot point that happens beyond the love triangle. And then it just falls into just, will they, won't they, will they, won't they, will they, won't they. And my problem is, okay, now, Peter wore it, okay, the original Peter Parker wore it from 1962 to 1979. Then he was exiled. Read the Park of the Lost Years. Yes, Ben Reilly's the original because, well, those comics were better written than any other era of Spider-Man.
And the implications were there in the comics.
And you look at, well, they retconned them in, but the Clone Saga is the most interesting because it's a film noir type setting, and I love that genre. But you look at, it took it back to its pulp roots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and the thing is, you look at, and they were also going to the cartoons genre for inspiration. Now, I'm a guy who's like, I prefer Spider-Man film noir, mystery, action, adventures, and with more heavy storylines than rom-com. Now, if I want to watch How I Met Your Mother, I'm going to go watch it. I love that show. Now, that said, the Clone wore the costume from 1979 to about 1994 or 5, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that by the time the costume was phased out, it had outlived its life cycle.
Because there's also another element in world why the costume needs to be ditched. And that has to do with the clone Peter was starting to get PTSD from all of the
Chameleon, Venom, Carnage,
Harry
Harry Osborn stuff. Great stories.
Everything that happened while in that costume, and he was starting to resent the costume.
Although, wait, I have to make an addendum to my previous statement. Sorry for interrupting. The Chameleon thing on its own is a terrible story, but when attached to the stories that followed, it was an important and good step.
Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why Peter's behavior when he picks up the Scarlet Spider's costume of the hoodie and looking at all the toys.
Yeah.
There wasn't...
we have to stop there. I have to stop you there because that's leading into the next video.
All right.
But that said, this costume is primarily armed with web shooters, a utility belt with web cartridges, Peter's camera, and with spider tracers.
Mm-hmm.
That's primarily what this costume is armed with. Now, in the animated series, he has a few flashlights from the belt. He carries one, I think, sometimes. He's got even more web cartridges than the comic book Peter. He does. He's got like a full belt of them. Peter in the comics only has them generally in the front. Peter in the cartoon has them all around the belt. Mm-hmm. And the camera sometimes hooks onto, I think, the belt. Sometimes it's like towards the back or something. Because very few enemies end up behind Peter. Because he's such a skilled fighter, they're always in front of him. So in that regard, I guess that's why you keep the camera in back so that, it doesn't get hit in the melee. But sometimes I've seen it, I think, on the side because, he might crash if he's hit hard enough. But either way, sometimes he takes the camera and sticks it on a piece of webbing nearby, leaves it there, and he'll come back for it later.
Mm-hmm.
And now the reason we go over all the gadgets is that it's important because that's part of the costume, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what's more is for the web shooters.
Eventually, Peter got fed up with running out of
web fluid
on a chase or running away from a threat that he ends up in free fall. So he decided to set up an LED light that would shine
and alert him when it's running low. Ben has the same thing in his superior web shooters,
and that is something that a lot of people forgot about. Even the creators of the animated series didn't...
Well, occasionally they remembered it.
Yeah.
But that said, I think they remembered it. But the reason I said Ben's web shooters are better is because they are.
Yeah.
Now, Peter's web shooters are fairly simple. He can do like a slime effect with them. He can web them into various shapes. He can do the usual thin, typical web. He can do a full spider web. But the thing is, it depends on the pressure and how he does it. But that's about all his web shooters can do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, Ben would enhance the web shooters with his impact webbing, stingers, as well as enhancing the actual strength of the webbing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, simply put, I guess Ben was the better inventor.
Mm-hmm.
And the better fighter.
Which, sure, Peter, give him kudos. He modified one of his older set of web shooters into bracelets for MJ for self-defense.
Yes. Now, when I say...
A pity that was dropped.
Yeah, well, not in the pre-97 era. I think that's the case. Now, that said, the reason I say Ben is better as a fighter and an inventor is because I think the comics make that argument for me, considering Peter was never able to beat either Carnage or Venom, and Ben beat Venom almost on his first outing when injured and bleeding out a little. And he also arrested Eddie Brock, which is quite the accomplishment considering how powerful Venom is.
Yeah. And
he, as an inventor, invented so many little gadgets and knickknacks for the web shooters that the decision to not include those web shooters in the post-97 era for Spider-Man basically demoted Spider-Man in a lot of ways, and it was part of the active campaign to turn him from the greatest mega hero in Marvel history into the lowest Z-list hero in all of Marvel history.
Because even the greatest heroes admired Spider-Man.
And he was the main hero.
Captain America even sometimes turned to Spider-Man and asked him to lead.
Before 97, Captain America was a C-lister.
Yeah.
He was a D to C-list hero. That's a fact, folks. And Spider-Man was the greatest A-list hero. He was the Superman and Batman rolled into one of Marvel.
And afterwards, they returned to the original costume. However, because of the treatment of Spider-Man when Joe Q came in,
it damaged the costume, at least in my eyes, and I think in yours. And it really, I find that that costume has become negatively affected in a way, at least in our perceptions. But it's also, the costume's been attached to all the worst Spider-Man stories. Yes, it's had a few good stories. I mean, that first Carnage story is a pretty good one. I still love it. That Harry Osborn Green Goblin story. I don't like Green Goblin stories, but I love that Harry Osborn one in the comics. I love that one. And I've never been able to get my hands on the comic. I had to actually borrow it, I think, at one point from the library. And I hate that I had to do that and I couldn't buy it. But the thing is, the costumes had some great stories, but it's also had some stinkers.
Mm-hmm. And just about all heroes went through changes in their costume, in particular with Marvel.
Yeah.
And yes, sometimes
the only one I think who didn't really, in some ways, was Cap. But it works for Cap.
Yeah.
I don't think his costume should ever change.
It's like the Fantastic Four, yes, they go back to the classic, but there's usually a small modification added from a later costume.
Yeah, I'll grant you that. Iron Man's is completely different.
It's not like the Avengers or the X-Men, which they do get bold.
They get regular costume changes. Spider-Man, after he got his 1995, I think it was, look, they should never have changed it.
I agree. And that's one thing about the 90s. As much as people harp on about the costumes of the 90s, yeah, sometimes you got bad costumes that were really
over the top. But sometimes you got even better costumes.
Mm-hmm.
And Batman had to go through a terrible costume period with Azrael before the Rainbow Batman.
It looked like
a transformer or something. Not in a good sense.
A transformer vomited all over it.
Yeah, and you know who the artist was who invented that? Joe Q.
That figures.
Man was always talentless.
Yeah.
But Azrael was a good character once he got out of that costume.
Oh, heavens, yes.
But Batman got a better costume. Bruce Wayne, the only Batman, got a good costume after that. Because the yellow thing was always something that had me going, no.
It worked with Adam West.
But not after.
It worked pre-Crisis. But when the entire mood of Batman switched, there was need of a change.
Yeah. And the darker costume, which, okay, the Panther outfit that Val Kilmer wore in Batman Forever, throughout a good chunk of that movie, just with a black logo, symbol, or even the armor that Bale's Batman wore, that outfit is perfect. That is the iconic Batman for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that came out in the 90s, I think.
And there are a lot of iconic costumes that is harder to change. For a long time, they tried new things with Wonder Woman, and they would have to revert back to.
Yeah, as I said, I like the pants from Injustice, but I do think the corset has to stay. And you know what? Maybe there's a reason why people are attached to Wonder Woman's outfit.
Mhm.
Even I'm kind of attached to it to a point. Although I think the pants look, her with pants and the stars, it does kind of like it. I think it's something everybody can agree on. But if people are more attached to the other look, the swimsuit look kind of look, it works. What I don't like is the Greek armor look.
Oh yeah.
I don't like that one. It's so weird. It's a skirt.
It's
Essentially.
Yeah.
And that's Roman, not Greek. And Diana's supposed to be Greek, not Roman.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, okay. I know the Greeks also kind of dress the same way, but still, Diana, like, I don't want her in a skirt because then you're just gonna have jokes about people looking up her freaking skirt like you do with Supergirl.
And she'll be just another magical girl joke.
Yeah. Now, that said,
and she does toss her tiara around at her enemies, so
only on occasion.
yeah.
Generally, she doesn't do that. She has her lasso of truth, which I really love. That weapon. Her lasso, I know in the 1940s was a really bad joke, but the 1940s comics were terrible for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman only got good around 1979.
Yeah, and there are other times you have to dump the classic costume. I don't know why, for example, Cyclops, they always go back to the hood.
His 90s look was better.
Yeah, where you saw his brown hair, like in the animated series.
That outfit's the best.
Yes.
But why do they keep going? Why don't they keep the Phoenix look for Jean? It looks good for her.
Mm-hmm.
Or Silver. Her classic look didn't work, but when they shifted to more her silver armor, it looked good.
Silver Sable was a mercenary commando type hero.
That should have all these guns and weapons on her.
So, going into the 90s, it would fit more her genre. So,
yeah. I never understood why they never kept her with her own ongoing title. I know, like, it didn't sell initially, but you market it, you add the marketing team to it, and you add a Howard Mackey type writer to it, and you'd be able to sell it.
It was the 90s. Mercenaries and commandos were all the rage.
Yeah, even in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually think going back to the 80s, they should have had an ongoing for her.
Yeah.
But under the Spider-Man editors and writers.
Mm-hmm.
But especially those of the 90s. But anyways, yeah, that's our overall history and examination of the original Spider-Man costume. Next time we'll be examining the Scarlet Spider costume. No, wait. We have to examine that symbiote costume first.
Oh, yes.
Which will be shorter, but kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like this video and you want to see the next video, like, share, subscribe.
And web that notification bell.
And leave a comment.